Reddit, what was the creepiest, most unexplained thing that ever happened to you? I was telling a friend about a dream in which our mutual, deceased friend Bill appeared. Bill leaned his elbows on a desk and said to me, "I'm waiting on the red-haired woman." Another friend standing nearby, who had never known Bill, became noticeably upset. She had long red hair. A few months later she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and she didn't survive. I was walking home from work one night, and I felt like someone was following me. I didn't pay much attention to it, but I walked a little faster. I could definitely hear someone or something. I stop and say out loud, "It feels like somebody wants to sell me something." I turned around, but no one was there. I'm sure they heard me, though. One day I was sitting with my dad, watching TV. As remember it, everything seemed to slow down as I blinked. I distinctly remember the TV flickering, the sound going out, our conversation being dropped, and a large shadow blocking the sun outside. I asked him about it, and he felt the same thing. It's almost like we lost a second of our life without an explanation. When I was 18 my car was broken into. I was on my way to work, so when I noticed I immediately called the police. Once they arrived we started sifting through the glass, documenting all that was taken. All the valuables were there. My CD player and phone accessories were intact. The only items missing were the contents of my center console, senior year photos, lipstick, my hairbrush, perfume and my weekly work schedule. The police had advised me not to go to work for the remainder of the week. I never figured out who it was. A friend and I were driving in the late evening on a country road when 5 cooked spaghetti noodles hit the windshield. Edit. So glad this made people laugh. I have no explanation for it. One time I went to bed with a Sully toy from Monsters Incorporated, and I woke up with 2 of them. I guess that's pretty spooky. A few months ago I explored an abandoned house with a few friends and we found an upside down room. In it, Ninja edit. Here's a picture of me standing in the room. I'm the fat one. Edit 2. The links were working for me. I re-uploaded the pictures to Imgur though. In August 2001, I was attending a wedding in New York. I stood across the Bay Harbor, IDK, from the World Trade Center, and thought this is the last time I'll ever see this. I immediately chastised myself for being ridiculous and morbid, because really, I went to New York City fairly regularly at that time, at least once a year, so of course I'd see it again. What, was I expecting to die or something? I had forgotten about it, actually, until a few years later, when I found my old journal from that time period. Weird. I used to have premonitions as a kid. One time, walking down the sidewalk of a busy street, I felt like something bad was going to happen. I saw in my mind's eye that I was going to get hit by a car. I stopped in my tracks for about 15 seconds, looked around to see there was no traffic on this side of the road, then slowly kept walking. About 5 seconds later a car hopped the curb and knocked over a trash can. I woke up one morning with a pentagram, scraped out of the frost, on the outside of my bedroom window. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, and while there was a 1st floor roof, there were only 3 prints in the snow on the 1st floor roof which had probably 10 feet between the edge and my window. Also, no prints in the show at the ground level. This was 20 years ago, and I still wonder what it was about. Unexplained. When I was younger I went to Sherwood Forest with my family. On the drive back to London the boot of the car flew open. On the motorway, about 2 hours drive later we were about to turn into our road when we saw my sister's coat in the mouth of the cul-de-sac. It had a Sherwood Forest badge on it. TLDR, after a family holiday my sister's coat hitchhiked for 100 miles and beat us home. I was around 5 or 6 and standing in the playground at school. Saw a boy throw a girl's rubber ball in the air, only it didn't come back down. We all just stood there staring at the sky for about 30 seconds waiting for it, but nothing happened. A teacher came over to ask what we were all looking at and all of a sudden it fell from the sky. Not really paranormal, but I still can't explain it after all these years. Walked down an alleyway at night once, and a shady looking character stepped out and asked, "Are you the guy?" I just said no and walked on. Kinda wish I said yes though out of curiosity. Not exactly creepy, but something I haven't been able to explain. I'm 5 years old. We are visiting my grandparents in India. I'm playing detective on the floor with a magnifying glass at my grandparents' house looking for clues. Clues to what? Who knows, but I'm sitting around looking for clues. All of a sudden I see a tiny newspaper written in Hindi through the magnifying glass on the floor. When the magnifying glass is at a certain angle, there's no newspaper visible to me without a magnifying glass. There aren't even any newspapers in the room, because I remember looking. Nobody else is able to see this mysterious newspaper. At that point, I did not know how to read Hindi, so I don't know what it said. I remember this very vividly. I do not believe it is something I imagined. I assume there is some scientific explanation for this, but I can't really come up with anything. When I was probably around 8 years old, I was sat at the top of the stairs reading a book. My mom and sisters were downstairs watching TV with the door closed. My dad was at work. Suddenly I felt a hand on my shoulder, like an actual physical feeling. I turned around, saw nothing, so I ran downstairs and asked who it was. Even if someone had gotten downstairs and closed the door in silence without me seeing in half a second, no one knew what I was talking about. I have absolutely no belief at all in ghosts or the supernatural, but it still felt so real, whatever it was that happened. Home alone one day with my dog and 2 of my friends' dogs. Out of nowhere, they all start barking and looking up towards the loft. As they're quieting down, I hear someone in a mocking, calm tone say, "Bark." They start going crazy again, and I decide it's time for a long evening walk. I was once in a half sleep, kind of dozing during an intense electrical storm, and I found I could sense the lightning strikes before they happened. It was like I could feel it gathering, and somehow sense the charge building. Then it would crash down, and start to build again. This only happened to me once. Kinda mundane and lame as far as creepy things go, but it freaked me out. One day at work, every step I took with my left leg made a sound like a squeaky hinge. All day, I emptied my pockets, took my shoes and belt off, and it continued. Step, squeak, step, squeak. I never did figure it out. Am I a rusty robot? Friends and were sitting on a park bench under a tree. A short homeless guy appears, jumps into the air, grabs a leaf a good 8 feet off the ground with his teeth, starts eating, then spits it on the ground and backs away into an alley. Maintained eye contact with all 4 of us simultaneously the whole time. I still have no idea. I've been hospitalized a lot when I was a kid. This hospital was a 2-hour drive from my home. Eventually there was a time I was in a good enough shape to stay home. After about a week of staying home, I was playing with some toy cars on the driveway when this huge truck turns into my street. When the truck drove by, I could clearly recognize my doctor behind the wheel and 3 of the nurses that looked after me sitting next to him in the cabin. They even smiled and waved at me when they passed me by. I ran inside the house to tell my mom, but she replied with the typical, "That's nice, dear." One day I was leaving a Walmart, I believe it was in Havelock, NC, or Moorhead, or somewhere on the way there from Newport Beach, I believe along Route 70, about 4 or 5 years back, maybe more. I've done this trip a lot. It was about 4 AM, and we had gotten stuff for a deep sea fishing venture. I walked out first, and was sort of gazing around, when I saw this strange light. At first I thought it was a parking lot light, but realized it was a lot farther away, and without a pole to it. After a few seconds it sort of zigzagged away, very quickly. I looked around, and although none of my group had seen it, another person, now I can't even remember what gender, had obviously seen it. I made a short comment regarding the sight and they agreed that it was very unusual. We were near some military base, which is what I tell myself for rationalization's sake, but it was a very strange light with very strange movements. People don't believe me when I tell them, but my dog appeared out of thin air in my room once. The door was closed, and I was in my room for a good hour, when all of a sudden I hear a weird yelp. I turn around, and my pup was already at the door scratching to get out. When I was in my early 20s, some friends and I were staying at a condo on the beach. It was the middle of the night, and I was sleeping on my back, and woke up, and opened my eyes. There seemed to be this blackness floating right over me. It is hard to describe, and I know it was during the night and dark, but this seemed to just floating about a foot over me, and was completely black, not just dark. I couldn't move at all, like I was paralyzed. I laid there, and tried to concentrate on moving my hand or leg and just couldn't. After what seemed like a few minutes, I finally managed to start moving my limbs, and when I could move freely again the blackness was gone. It was really strange, and somehow I went back sleep that night without being completely freaked out.